With GraFx for CFX, you can now create your own custom blade effects. How you can create these and how you can set up your blade profiles and color profiles so it all blends in rather nicely, I will show you right now. Let's go. Let's go through this process like I normally would when I would create a GraFx package for a specific sound font. Now, the first thing that I would do is actually select the sound font. In this case, it would be Omen, that's a grayscale font. I haven't already created a GraFx package for this sound font, so this will be completely new. Once this video is over, I'll make sure to offer the files I create as a download for free as a GraFx package on the website, so you can see what I did. Now, what we need to do is, since we're going to create a new blade style and a new color profile, which is linked to a specific GraFx package, we need to make sure that the blade and color profile that we're going to use aren't already being used by other sound fonts. And if you have a lot of sound fonts, that can be quite a task, because you need to check the font config of each sound font and note the start blade and start color value of each font config. Now, in this case, it's 0 for both. So I know that the color profile with index 0 and the blade profile with index 0 are already in use. So now I know if I want to change any blade profile or color profile, let's make sure it's not the one with index 0. If you have Crystal FX, this task can be a little bit easier, because if you hover over a blade profile, it will tell you if it's in use by any sound font and also by which sound fonts. And the same goes for the color profiles. I can see its color profile with index 0 is being used by the sound font, and all these other color profiles are not being used at all. So I'm free to use the color profile with index 1, so that's this one, and I'm free to use any other blade profile except the one with index 0. Now, in this case, there's only one blade profile. Now, what we can do is we can simply duplicate this blade profile and make sure there's an empty line in between, copy and paste it, and change the index, and now we have two blade profiles. If I go into the Omen font folder, and I can now link this sound font to blade profile with the index number 1, and I will also do the same for the color profile. Now, another thing that's good to know in this font config are these two parameters, which have an effect on the speed of the animation of the power on and power off, and it's always good in case of the GraFx to set this to 0, because then the CFX will calculate the speed of the animation automatically depending on the sound duration. So just set them to 0 for now. After you've set up the sound font to be linked to specific blade and color profiles, we can set up the GraFx folder. And let's have a look to the GraFx folder. You can find this in the extra GraFx folder, and here you will see some are already present due to the default package that you can download from Black Labs. Now, in this case, I know that the first GraFx folder is already being used. Second one, I recognize this is from the default package, so this isn't being used at all, and I can link this folder. I need to remember this index, so that's index 0 for the GraFx folder. What's also possible, if you have already have some GraFx enabled over here and you need to create a new one, that's rather simple. You can just create a new folder, give it the correct number, so the last one is 4. I need to name this 5, and I can give this any name I want. So now I could also place my files in here, but for now I need to remember that I'm going to use the GraFx folder with index 1. So let's go back to the config file, main configuration, and edit the blade profile that we just created. So that's the blade profile with index number 1. And let's go to the style GraFx 1 parameter and change this value to 1, because we now want to link the GraFx folder with index 1 to this parameter. What do these parameters actually mean? Because there's 3 of them. In most cases you will only need the style GraFx 1, and that's to link a specific GraFx folder to the main blade. The second one is for, I do believe, tridents, and the third one is for, I do believe, accent pixels. I'm not sure. I can check this in the parameter library. So there's 1, 2, and 3. 1 is for the main blade. 2 is for the aux blade on LS2. And GraFx 3 is for the, I believe this is for the tridents. So that's number 3. So this is also good to remember. You can search any parameter on crystalfocus.net/parameters, and it will very quickly give you an answer to your question. Now we've linked the correct GraFx folder, we can move into the GraFx folder and configure that correctly. So let's move into the GraFx folder and set that up correctly. The GraFx folder in extra GraFx, and we selected the number 1 GraFx. Let's rename this to Omen, since that is the sound font that we're going to link to this. Let's open this, and you will see a couple of default files. And these files have a very specific name, and these names are for the animations that are now available for you to use as a GraFx animation. So we have idle, lockup, normal, so that's when the blade is ignited. We have the power off, and we have the power on. There's actually 2 missing. We also have the pre-on and also the post off. Now, as you can see, all have the number 1 behind the name, and that is because multiple GraFx animations per CFX stage are supported. So for the idle stage, you can have several bitmaps, and you should name them idle 1, idle 2, idle 3, etc. And this goes for all these CFX stages. Now, in the near future, it will be possible to link power on 1 specifically to the power on 1 sound effect, and so you can create a power on 1 that matches the power on 1 sound effect and power on 2 that matches the power on 2 sound effect. Right now this isn't possible, so beware. Some of the sound font makers do create effects that vary a lot in pace or duration, and that will definitely mess up your GraFx animation, so you need to look out for that. For now, we can get rid of all these bitmaps. We don't need them. And let's throw them away and take a look at the grafx1.txt. So this is the configuration file for this specific GraFx package. And if you have a look inside, you will see that the same stages are mentioned here: the power on, power off, pre-on, post off, LEDs, so that's locked to the normal 1.bmp, and that's when the blade is ignited, and lockup. So these stages are currently supported, and you can create GraFx animations for them. To keep things very simple, I like to use the very basic setup at first, and once you get the hang of this and you know what does what, you can try to experiment. But for now, just get rid of these lines, the pulsed and pulsal lines. You don't need them right now. So what these lines do, they are interesting. You can use them for your pixel to pulse at a specific speed and a specific depth. So it will pulse from a color to dark, from a color to dark, and you can use that. But you need to change also this line to have it take an effect, but that's for a different time and not right now. Let's have a look at this line right here. So the accent line actually determines how many pixels are going to use the GraFx pixel sequencer. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that there are as many A's on this line as there are pixels in your blade. So if you have a blade that has 117 pixels in it, please make sure that you have at least 117 A's on this line. If you have more, it doesn't matter, that's okay. You can even choose to place 140 or 200 over here just as a default and reuse that file for all your blades. That's absolutely no problem. What I like to do is to set the delay for the power on to 0, and that's with a reason. The delay parameter combined with the Q on parameter that we talked about earlier in the font config. If you open the font config, early on I changed these two parameters to 0, and that means that the CFX will calculate the speed of the power on and power off animation to match the duration of the power on sound effect and the power off sound effect. So if you use this, your scrolling up effect or scrolling down effect will match that sound effect duration exactly, and that's rather useful. Also, the same applies to the GraFx animation. If you change this, then your power on effect will be determined, the length of the power on effect will be determined by the setting in milliseconds, and it might screw up. So using some calculations that I'll give later on in this process, we can create a setup in which we can let the CFX auto-calculate the animation speed. So we need to set these two to 0, and we also need to set this parameter to 0 as well. Now, for those that want to know, this delay parameter sets call it the frame rate of the pixel sequencer in milliseconds. As you might know, or maybe this is completely new for you, if you take any GraFx package, and let me see if I can find one. If you take any GraFx file like this one, and let's zoom in. So this is a GraFx file I created for the Sauron sound font. If you have a look at this file consists of lines, and each line of this file will be read at a specific speed, and the delay parameter in this configuration sets the time in milliseconds that it will take for the CFX to read the next line. And I will tell you a bit later on what this means exactly. Just keep in mind that the delay parameter determines the speed of your GraFx animation. The many parameter enables you to use several GraFx files for the same stage. So for the power on stage, like I told earlier, if I create a power on 1 bitmap and a power on 2 bitmap, power on 3 bitmap, then I can set the amount of power on bitmaps that I have using the many. So if I have 3, then I can set it to 3, and the CFX will know this. So this is very useful. So the CFX will know how many bitmaps to use for the power on stage. the stop parameter will, in our case, we're not going to need it. But if you're going to mess about and try your own GraFx animations, you can use the stop parameter. It's useful if you don't want the animation to repeat itself. So if you don't create a GraFx animation that will run at exactly the duration of the sound effect, you can make the animation stop halfway through the sound effect, and it will only show the last frame of the animation for the duration of the sound effect. Let's set this to 1. During the ignited stage, it's I think impossible to determine by forehand how long someone will keep the blade ignited, and you'll actually do want the animation to repeat itself over here. So let's set it to 0 over here, and the same goes for the lockup, because we don't know and we want the animation to repeat itself if it has finished. So for those two you can set it to 0. Now let's have a look to the other parameters, and they all seem fine. Now what you see over here is that we only used as and an A in correct English, and an A is for a regular accent. So an A will just show whatever you want it to show using the GraFx bitmap files. And there are a lot of options. You can find them in the manual, but for now just keep it simple. Only use the A, and the CFX blade will only show exactly what you've created in the bitmaps that we'll do in a later stage. So right now we've set up the GraFx file correctly for the accents, for the many, and for the stop. Let's have a look for the delay parameter again. The power off should be set to 0 because we have the Q off parameter also set to 0. Then the pre-on and post off in the other effects. For these other effects, there's not a specific Q on or Q off parameter that goes for the pre-on or the post off, blade ignited and lockup effect. And what I like to do is I've selected my own default, which is 25, which is also just about the quickest animation that you can get using the CFX. If you go any lower, meaning the animation will go faster, then you might get some weird results. So if you're going to experiment, you can always make this higher. So putting in 250 will make the animation slower because it will now take 250 milliseconds for each frame instead of 25 milliseconds for each frame. So this is just about the max, and I like to use this because I use this everywhere. In all of my GraFx animations, I believe I'm using the 25 delay, which will give a very smooth animation. This is setting up the GraFx configuration, and I actually reuse this exact same configuration for 99 out of 100 GraFx packages that I make. I don't need to redo this. I can use this for every GraFx package that I create, and in the case there's just an exception and I want to do something different for the post-off, I just change that. But for most of the times I just reuse the same GraFx configuration over and over again. So please do the same. You don't need to do this again. You can literally copy this one and you'll be fine and good to go. Now we've set up the GraFx configuration file. We've set up the sound font to use the correct blade profile and the correct color profile. Now let's change the blade profile. So we get the GraFx animations that we want to create when, example, for the power on, for the post off, and other effects. So let's go into the blade profile and have a look. Now, first we need to see which animations we really need to create. So is there a pre-on this sound font? Yes, there is. So we do have a pre-on effect. After that we have a power on effect. We have the regular hum effect. And after that we have a power off. There it is. And a several post off effects actually. So the first thing we need to set up is the pre-on effect, so that the blade profile uses the GraFx pre-on animation. And let's keep it at that. We can leave all the other effects not using GraFx right now because we don't have the bitmaps for them, and the CFX doesn't like it when you point a specific animation to a GraFx bitmap and it doesn't exist. So that could freeze your CFX and make it non-responsive. So let's take this one step at a time and only link the pre-on effect right now and keep the rest at a regular or a stock effect for now. So let's go into the blade profile in the config and go to profile number 1. And here are the parameters. So this is for the regular power on. Let's set this to 0. And again, it was set to 10 because I copied this from the other blade profile that was already present. And if we have a look at the options that there are for this parameter, this is the power on effect. And 10 is a GraFx animation. So if I set this to 0, it will be just a regular stock or a firmware effect. So let's set this to 0. The same goes for the power off effect. And I do like to check this. The power off effect again. Let's have a look. 11 is the GraFx, and you see all the other options are linked right here. So we can also set this to 0. The same goes for the power off effects, 0. And are there any other effects? Power on, power off. I do believe we should have a post off effect, and I don't see it right now. So let's have a look. Style, the post off effect should be here. It should be this one, style post off. And didn't I see it, or is it just missing? Let's check. Ah, there it is. Style post off to 0. So that's okay. And we only need the pre-on effect to point at the GraFx bitmap. So let's select. I know this is number 4, but just for example's sake, this is the GraFx pre-on, so that's number 4. Let's set this to 4. So now we know when we first ignite this the blade with the sound font selected, with the omen sound font selected, which is pointing at the blade profile with this index, profile number 1, it will try to use the pre-on GraFx effect, and it will look for the GraFx effect in the folder marked with index 0 in the extra GraFx folder on your SD card. So now we know that this is set up correctly, and we can start to create the first GraFx bitmap actually. The configuration seems to be done right now, so let's put this SD card into a saber and start working on the bitmap. Right, so let's get into the good stuff and create a pre-on effect for this sound font. So, what you need to know about GraFx. GraFx is a pixel sequencer, meaning that it will translate these pixels from a bitmap to your saber blade. and you need to be aware of some of the basics that apply to this GraFx pixel sequencer. Now, I think I can explain best by using a previously created GraFx package, and let's zoom in rather well so you can see the lines. Now you can clearly see each independent line on this bitmap, and the bitmap will be read from bottom to top and line by line, and each pixel in this bitmap, so each square in this bitmap, will control one pixel in your saber blade. So if you have 117 pixels in your blade, this pixel will control this pixel of the bitmap will control the first pixel in your blade. This will control the second one, the third one, etc., etc., etc. So, and it will control them over time. So, in the first frame is the first line. Your first pixel will be black. The second line, your pixel will be of your first pixel on the blade will be black. On the third line of this bitmap, your first pixel of the blade will become a bit bluish. So this is at the base of your blade, at the hilt side, and all the way to the top. All these pixels will control the pixels on the tip of your blade. So all these lines will be played one by one on your blade at a specific frame rate. And that's what we talked about before. That's the frame rate that you can set using the configuration in the GraFx folder. So if you go into the GraFx folder that we set up, we have the delay option over here for the pre-on, which is set to 25 milliseconds. So each line in the bitmap will be visible on your blade for 25 milliseconds, meaning that you can play about 40 lines each second. And this is important because we want to have your blade animation match the sound font exactly. So we want to know the exact duration of the pre-on effect, and with the set animation speed, so we have the 25 milliseconds for each line in the bitmap that's going to be visible. If you know the duration of the sound effect, we can calculate the exact height of the bitmap that is required to match the pre-on effect, in this case, perfectly. So let's have a look for the pre-on effect, and it's over here, pre-on, and here I'm using Audacity, and I can see this is often the case with these grayscale fonts. He loves to make his sound effects a specific length, and in this case it's exactly half a second. And usually Grayscale does this for all his effects. He makes them the exact same time span. So if we have a look and take the other pre-on effect, this is also exactly half a second. Now if I want to calculate the height of the bitmap, so it will match the duration of the sound files exactly when using a delay of 25 milliseconds for each frame, then I can say, okay, per 1 second I will play 40 frames, so for half a second I will play, or I would need 20 frames. So this is the height of the bitmap that is required when playing my GraFx animation at a speed of with a delay of 25 milliseconds for each frame for this sound effect, which is half a second long. Now if you're going to use the because I can imagine that it can be tough to get your head around this. Now what I've created is the GraFx simulator. If you log into the website in the top right corner at crystalfocus.net, you will get these creators options, and I can now select here the audio for the GraFx simulation. And let's go to the pre-on effect. If I load in this file and I go to the bitmap height calculator, I can set my target delay setting. Now, remember, we set this to 25. It's now set to 50. So if I set this to 25, it will immediately give you the required height of your bitmap. So that's a very easy tool, and it will save you lots and lots of time and mistakes if you have to calculate this each time by hand. So that can be very useful for you. Just have a look. Also, good to know, since each of these, let's reopen this, since each of these pixels control one pixel in your blade, you need to make sure that the width of your bitmap is exactly, or at least, the amount of pixels that you have in your blade. So if you have a blade that contains 117 pixels, please make sure that your bitmap is at least 117 pixels wide. If your bitmap is wider, that's no problem, because the extra pixels will just be lost beyond the tip of your blade. But if you create a bitmap that is only 50 pixels wide and your blade has 117 pixels, then only half of your blade will show the GraFx animation. In my case, when I create these bitmap of GraFx packages, I try to support loads and loads of different blade lengths. And if I have a look at the default that I'm using right now, this is the latest one, and I am supporting these these different blade lengths. So 115, 117, 125, 128, 133 and 140 pixels are supported in these packages that are available on the website right now. We'll get back to that later on. So please make sure, if you create a GraFx bitmap, make sure that it has that the width of the bitmap is the same as the amount of pixels in your blade. So that's very important. Now, we have this set up. I know that my blade length is 117 pixels. I know that the number of lines that I need for the pre-on effect is 20 lines, so 20 pixels high. So I can now create my first bitmap. And I like to use Photoshop for this, and there's one very good reason that I like to do this, and that's because it supports layers, and that can be very useful. So I want to create, since my blade has 117 pixels, that's my width. And the height we just calculated, and I create this bitmap right now. Now, we can test this. I can save this as a bitmap. Let me go to the grayscale. This is it, and it is for Omen. And I'm just going to prepare my default package setup. 117 pixels, and this is for the pre-on effect. So I'll save this as pre-on 1.bmp. Let's have a look. Open file location. Yes, there it is. So this is a completely black bitmap with what seems to be the correct height and width. Now, I can load this into the simulator, and it's not really required at this point, but it can be very useful. It will immediately start playing, and the first thing I need to change is, because the current frame rate is 500, so this is the delay setting times 10, because I want it to be extra accurate. So if I want to match this perfectly, I need to set this to 250. And you can see now the bitmap, which is previewed over here, will run at exactly the right pace. So when the sound effect starts, we're at the start of the bitmap, and when the sound effect ends, we're exactly at the end of the bitmap. So that's a good confirmation. Now we can try and create an effect for this preon effect. This preon effect is pretty short. If we preview it again, we can hear it's almost like two buzzes. It's doo-doo, doo-doo. So I think a good effect that we can create for this preon is an effect that will go from the tip of the blade to the hilt and then move back upwards, and let's keep a sort of glow at the hilt side. So when the power on starts, we can have an ignition that starts at the hilt and moves up the blade. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's first go into the bitmap, and here is where I really love Photoshop, because I can create these different layers and easily draw one layer on top of another layer and leave the other layers alone, which is something that's more difficult to do when using paintbrush, or I don't know paintbrush, but paint from Windows. So let's create the effect starting at the tip of the blade. So as you can see right here, we have several frames that are the lines, and here is the hilt of your blade and the base of your blade at the hilt side, and here is the tip of your blade. So if you want to create an effect that's starting at the tip of the blade and moving to the base of the blade, we need to start over here and draw a line that goes to the first pixel. And then if we want to create something that's moving upwards, we can draw another line and make it move upwards like this. So now we've got the basic animation set. Let's merge these, and after the white line has reached the base of the blade, I want to keep a bit of a glowing effect in red. So let's draw that in. Let's create a new layer and draw in the glowing effect over here. Now let's make it a bit erratic by what's it called? Smudging it. Like this. And I can save this as a bitmap again and preview it using the simulator. So it's saved. Let's load this in. Here it is. And it will, after I select this, it will immediately start playing on the simulator. So there you see it. It starts at the tip of the blade, moving down, and when it's moving up again, you will see this pre-glow effect start right here. Once we've previewed it over here, now we can save it to the SD card on the saber and actually ignite it, because we set the blade profile first, we set the preon effect to use the GraFx, so everything's already set up. So now let's save this preon effect to the SD card and preview it on the saber. So I need to go to the SD card. I've hooked up my saber right now and enabled USB access mode, so I can access the files. Let me go into the extra GraFx, and we set up the GraFx folder with index 1. Open this, and since this is the preon effect, I will name this file preon1 and save this as BMP. That's a bitmap file. If you're using paint or paintbrush, I do believe this will be a default setting. So let's save this. And now I can move on to the saber. So let me hook up a camera and preview this peon effect on the saber itself. Right, so as you can see right here in the screen, I've hooked up the saber and I just loaded the peon effect onto the GraFx folder, so we're ready to test this. And I've actually hooked up the CrystalFX for desktop application, as you can see right here, and we're connected, so I can easily start up the saber right now. So if things went according to plan, we should see something like this for the peon effect. So let's start up the saber and see if we see something moving from the tip of the blade to the base and back up, and a small pre-glowing effect. So let's see. And right there. So this is the regular ignition during the power on that you will see, but during the peon effect we do see the effect that we just created. So that's pretty nice. So next thing that we can do is we can start to create the power on effect. So let me just get rid of this preview. Okay, there we are. And get rid of this. So we just created the peon effect. And let me save this file so I can share this with you later on. Right, so I've saved the file. Let's move on to the power on. And for the power on, basically the steps are quite the same. So first thing I do is I select the audio for the power on, and that's on the SD card. So let me enable the USB mode and go to the Omen font. We did the peon, and now let's move on to the power on effect. So that's over here. Set the delay to 25. Now I know that I need to create a bitmap with height 160 pixels, and since my blade holds 117 pixels, I know the width, and now I also know the height. You could also calculate this yourself as I showed you before, but let's move on and create this one. The width 117 pixels and the height 160 pixels. So this is our new bitmap, and what I like to do is I like to save this first, give it the correct name, power on 1, save it and load it into the simulator so I can preview the audio. Let me go to this file, power on, and right, so it will preview immediately. I've already set the current frame rate to 250, so that's the used delay of 25 times 10 is 250, and now we can start creating the power on. So if you listen to the power on, it actually consists out of two parts. One is the ignition part, and behind that it's well, it's a blank, and during that time the regular blade effect of the regular blade will blend in with the power on, so you get a smooth transition. So what's important for us to know is how long does it take for the power on sound to finish. And again, you can calculate this yourself. You can use Audacity and load this file into Audacity. So let me show that. And let's get the power on effect. Now, you can use this to say, okay, exactly after, let's say 2 seconds, the actually sound during this sound effect will stop, and because it's 2 seconds and I play about 40 frames each second, I can place a marker at about 80 lines, because after playing 80 lines in my bitmap, the sound effect will stop. That's one way you can do this, but you can also do this without using any calculations, and that's simply by adding a marker at the correct time. So if we listen to the sound effect again, now what I did is I placed a marker at the time that I think the sound effect just stopped. Now let me preview this. I was a bit late, so when I want to do this correctly, I need to change this and move the marker up a bit so it will be sooner. So if I want this marker to be sooner, I need a higher line number. Now, since we just calculated this using Audacity, let's test this and use the 80 and preview again. And that seems just about correct. So if I go into the bitmap, I can now place a marker at line 80. Let's create a marker layer and just simply mark this at line 80. That's over here. Now, for me, this is a useful visual tool, so I know when to start changing the power on effect. So until here in the bitmap, moving from bottom to top, this part will contain the sound and this part will contain the blanks. So now I can start creating and filling in these animations. Now, what I have in mind is, since the preon consists of, let me just shut this down. Alright, so since the preon consists of a white line moving downwards and then upwards again with a red preglow, the power on effect I think should be a white line combined with some red moving upwards very fast. So let's have a look and create some white lines moving up until here. The effect should be very visible, and after here, since this is all blanks in the sound effect, we can leave it. So first, let's create a white line moving up, and this is just a guessing. I don't know how this will look, but I think this will give a nice speedy upwards motion on the blade. And behind that, well, let's give it 2 lines actually. Two lines moving up, and behind that let's start showing the red lines going up. So here we can draw some red lines. And maybe starting from here, let's fade in the last bit of red so it will become a fully stable red blade. Until here. From here I think it should be completely red. Now let's fade this in, starting from black to fully red, and use a bit of Photoshop to do this. Let's do this like an upwards motion. So, like this. And after that, of course, the blade must be fully ignited. So from here, it must be fully red. Let's fill this up. That's black. Okay, let's fill this up with red. That's it. And now we can try and preview this. So let's save this again. This is the power on. Let's save, okay. Go back to the simulator, and I always like to use a simulator just simply because of the speed in which I can preview this. And if it looks okay, then I will move on. That's pretty okay. I do think the upwards line should be just a little bit quicker. So let's change this and go back a couple of steps. And make these lines just a bit steeper, so the upwards motion will be quicker. So let's do this like this. And copy it. Now let's do this 3 times. And starting from here, make it move into red from the dark side. Okay, and fill it up with a gradient in a new line. That should be it. Now add the lines that were previously there already with red. And make the blade completely red from this point on. Alright, let's try this again. Save it. Preview it on the simulator. That's actually quite okay. Now you still see the white flash. That's because of this marker. Let's remove this. Okay, so that's pretty okay. Now let's try if we can save this to the saber and preview it live on the blade. So I've enabled the USB access mode. I can save this file now to the GraFx folder. GraFx, Omen, select the bitmap file and select power on 1 as the name for the power on effect and save it. So now we previously configured the blade style just to use the pre-on effect. So now we've moved on to the power on effect, and it's important that we also configure the blade profile to use the power on effect. So that's the style pawn, and quickly let's search this parameter on the website to see what's what. So what do I need to set this to make this power on effect use GraFx? And that's number 10. So I know I can set style pawn to 10, and then it will try to use the GraFx bitmap that's located in the folder that's linked with style GraFx. So that's the GraFx folder with index 1. Yes, save it. Now, all should be in place for us to demonstrate this effect. So let's go back to the saber preview, open up Crystal Effects. I will end the USB mode, and let's see if this is going to work. So this is not working as expected, so let's try to reset the saber first and reboot this. Okay, and try again. Now it's working as expected. So we do see the GraFx pre-on, and after that we see the GraFx power on. So far so good. And now let's move into adding some details into this power on effect, because there's just some bits and pieces missing. Right, back to the simulator. So I told you some bits and pieces were missing. So if we take a look at this preview and the matching sound, then you will hear that the sound effect is still ongoing whilst the blade animation already is in full stop, or it's getting quite stable. So we need something to make it more unstable during the sound effect. So let's listen to this once more. So we know that until the spot where we've placed the marker in the bitmap, so let's place this bitmap marker at the top once again so it becomes visible. So we know that within the bitmap, until this spot over here, there's a unstable sound effect. So we need to add something to the bitmap so it will match the sound font. And this is something that you can continue to do for hours and hours and hours and hours. And most of my GraFx packages I set up rather quickly, and then I just keep adding and experimenting, and that can go on for hours or sometimes even days. So this is the fun part for me, and I won't go into that much detail right now during this tutorial, but let's just add some effects to this so you can see what's possible. So what might be fun on this blade style, because it goes from dark into red, is to add some black lines going from the tip of the hilt to the base of the hilt. So let's just simply draw in some dark lines, and like this. That's okay. And then let's add another layer and add some unstable white lines, and just see what happens, because they come from the blade. Let's just add these lines like this. And maybe some flashes in there as well. And like this, and save this again. This is the power on effect. Let's save this. Okay, preview it on the simulator. And let's see. Oh, that looks pretty good. So let's try and preview this on the saber itself. I'll start USB access mode once more, and I will save this to the SD card. It's the power on effect. Okay, now it's saved. Reconnect, and I will enable the preview. So let's see what happens right now. So that's very visible. It could even be just a little bit more unstable. But for now, that's okay. So we've got a pre-on effect, we've got a power on effect. And next step is trying to see if we can blend it into the regular blade style, because now you see that it goes from the red power on GraFx effect straight into the regular blade style, which is a different color. And you see the transition is rather harsh. Now we can change this using some ignition settings. So let's first power off. Okay. Now if you go into the blade profile and we take a look at the ignition parameters. So for GraFx, the over pawn option is very important. As you can see, we have several options over here, And overlay means that you will only see the graphics animation on your blade. If you use any of the other options like melt or blend effects or curtain, this will mean that you will get to see some regular blade style blending in with the GraFx power on effect. So what I like to do is use the curtain option, which means that at the very end of the power on effect you will see the regular blade style appear. Let's try out these different overpawn settings so you can see what they do. First of all, let's try melt and ignite the blade. There, you just see the melt effect. So what you would have seen is that you can see the regular blade style appear from the hilt side and slowly moving up to the tip of the blade. So at the end of the power on effect you still see an upwards motion. There you go. Now let's compare this with the overlay option, which will only show the GraFx power on. There you go. There's no upwards motion at all, but at the end of the GraFx animation you will see this hard transition to the regular blade style. Now let's use the blend effects option. Again, you will see the slow transition from bottom to top. And now let's use the curtain effect. And there you go. You'll see a smooth transition going from the GraFx power on until it has moved into the regular ignited stage. There you go. So I often choose the curtain overpawn setting because it simply gives the best transition to the regular blade style. Now, since we've got a red ignition, it would be very nice to also have a red blade style. And I'm using CrystalFX to change these settings, but you can also do this using the color profile that we just hooked up. So let's change this to red and save the changes to the CFX, so the config is now stored, and try the ignition once again. There you go. So that's very smooth. Now, what you would have done without CrystalFX to change this main blade color to red is you would have gone onto the SD card, open the colors.txt, go into the color profile that we are using and change the color parameter. So that's the main blade color, and that's an RGB white value with the 1023 is the max. So if you want red, we would only set the R to a maximum value, so that's 1023, and the rest we can set to zeros. And there's actually a nice feature of the website that allows you to create these color profiles on the fly. And let's see if I can show this to you. So we have the color profile builder over here, and here you can create any color that you want, and it will give you the CFX color code. So you can see if you want to create purely red, let's max this out. This is max red, and you can see the exact same color code over here. So that's another useful tool that you get if you log in on the website. And you can also get the RGB values, which again is very useful if you want to create the exact same color in any of the bitmap editors. So for a translation from any bitmap editor back to the CFX, or from the CFX back to any bitmap editor, this can be very useful and will save you some time. So I've set it to max red, and this is how you would have done it manually. Now I will edit the color profile only using CrystalFX, simply because it's faster and it will show you directly on the saber what will change. So Moving on to the blade style itself. If you look at the blade style itself, now it's a flat blade, so let's have a look. This is a very flat blade and I want it just to be a little bit unstable. So I would set the unstable parameter to one of these options. Again, if you want to know each option of this unstable parameter, you can look it up in the website, or when using CrystalFX it will simply give you these options. I want to create an unstable blade like this. Now I can play with these sliders and make it even more unstable or less unstable, and just simply playing with these sliders without having any knowledge of these parameters at all will still give a very nice effect. So this is something that can be very much fun to play with. And let's see if we can create something that's visually nice. So this is a rather unstable blade, and let's add some more flickering, and that's it. I'll save these changes and let's see if we can now see these blending in option that we selected in the previous step, and see if the unstable effect blends in as nicely as we want to. And here you see it blends in rather nicely, so we have a basic setup for our blade style. Now, next thing that I would do is I would test the clashes and see if they light up, which they don't. Let me see. Let's change the flash, clash on flash, and the lockup and the bolt, stab, drag, and flicker all to white. So if I give a clash right now, you will see it a bit better, and the lockup, it's rather visible. Blasters, very visible. And again, you can change these on the fly. So for the bolt, this is set to energy, but I can select any of these other options like splitting waves. And you will get some different blaster effects. Now, I like the energy one for this sound font. Looking good. So the next thing we need to do, let's save this again, is to create the power off effect. So let's have a look. Back to the website and the simulator. Upload the power off effect and see what the bitmap size is that we need to create. Go to the omen, select the power off effect. There we go. The calculated bitmap height is 10 pixels, so we can create a bitmap of 10 pixels. Now, first save this one because I want to share this later on with you. Power on. Okay, and let's create a new one with 117 and the height is 10 pixels. Okay, then save this just to be able to load this into the simulator. This is the power of 1 bitmap. Save it, and now I can upload it into the simulator. So it's very short, and after this short sound we will get the post off, presume. So let's have a look at the post off effect so we know what we need to build into. Okay. So that sounds like an actual power off, and the power off itself is like a a pre-off effect. Seeing that we started from a red unstable blade, I think we can create the power off fairly easy, because this can be a red blade. Let's make it red. And maybe give it a white line. Like this, a white line. A white line. Like this, moving from the tip to the base of the blade. And maybe just some spots here and there in white. So this can be a nice power off effect. Okay, let's save this again and preview it on the simulator. That's okay, looking good. And now we can add it to the saber. So let's enable the USB mode and save this to the SD card in the extra folder, GraFx, again the same GraFx folder, and we can save this as the bitmap power of 1.bmp. Let's save this. Now again, we need to extend or change our blade profile that we used in the config file. So let's move to that blade profile over here. The blade profile with index 1. Go to the style power off. That's this one, and set it to use the GraFx power off. Again, just for argument's sake, this is number 11 to set it to GraFx, so it's not always the same number. For power off it's 11, for power on it's number 10. So if we set this to 11, then we should now see, if my memory serves me correct, I need to reset the saber first for the changes to take effect. Let's do that, and the saber is now reset. And let's see if the power off is working correctly right now. Could be, it's hard to tell. I don't know. Just for tidy administration, I need to manually set this to use a power off, and it's in overlay mode, so that's okay. We should only see the GraFx sequence during the power off, and let's make sure that the Q off is also set to 0, and let's try again. I think that's more like it. We saw something moving from the tip to the bottom. So that's a very short power off. Now let's make sure that everything is in order. And let's manually check. Let's go into the extra GraFx 0, and we have a power of 1. So that's correct. In the GraFx we have a power off section with delay 0, so that's okay. And looking at the blade profile, the style POV is set to 11, so that's also okay. Now, let's see if we can make this a little bit more visible to actually make sure that we're using this bitmap. Let's make it entirely white. Enable the USB mode, and let's save this entirely white, power off over here. And let's see if it's visible right now. Yeah, it is. It's very short, but it's very visible. Now, because of all the white, my battery has died, so I'll change the battery on my saber and we'll continue from there. Back in the game, let's preview this one more time. Okay, so that's okay, and I even like the white flash, so I'll just leave it completely white. If I want to change this later on, that's okay, and I just need to save this so I can share this with you after the video is done. And now let's move on to the post off. So same steps again. Calculate the bitmap height, and I'll let the simulator do that for me. So I need to go to the post off effect and enable USB mode to be able to select the file. Okay. Omen and the post off effect. There you go. Now, with a delay of 25, my bitmap needs to be 160 pixels high. So let's create that bitmap right now. Okay, so that's 117 pixels wide and 160 pixels high. 160. Okay, again, I like to save this. And this is the post off one BMP file. Now let's upload this to the simulator. Okay, so that's one big boom and a lot of After Effects. So what I would like to do here is, since the power off effect is this white burst, let's just show this one more time. And after that, it's a blank right now. So what we can do is we can make the blade retract really fast after that. And make it retract upwards with a white trailing line. So let's do that. Okay, and it's doing that rather quickly. Now let's do it the other way around. I'll retract it to the base of the blade so we can have a nice glowing effect or cooling down effect at the hilt side. So we've got to have a red start or some red, and we need to create some white lines. So let's create this downwards motion with some white lines like this. First one, second one, and maybe even a third one. And everything before these lines should be red, because we're starting from a red blade. And after these lines it should be black, but we will have this glowing effect that will be going on after that. So let's make the glowing effect at the bottom of the blade over here, which will disappear. And we want this to have a nice upwards flame-like effect. So let's smudge this a bit, going upwards. So this is something I learned during trial and error, and just keep at it and experiment a lot. Let's save this as the post off. Yes. And now we can preview this again on the simulator before I load it onto the saber. Post off, and let's see. Okay, maybe give it some white flashes at the start. Seeing that this big bang sound came at the start, so let's give this some white flashing. Like that. I'll try again. And save. Okay, let's load this into the simulator again. Okay, that's pretty okay. I'm not entirely happy about that. It's because I've had some opacity settings, so let's make this even whiter, because these flashes need to be really visible. So, like that. Now, and let's add one more. Okay, I'm happy. Let's load this onto the saber. And save this on the SD card. Extra GraFx, same GraFx folder. Save it as a BMP and save it as posthalf1.bmp. Save it. Okay. Now, again, we need to change the blade profile, so it will also use the GraFx posthalf effect. So once again, go into the blade profile and change the style posthalf effect, and let's search for this again. So I'm searching this over and over again to demonstrate you guys that you can find any parameter of the CFX on this website, and it can be a really useful tool. By now I know the defaults, and I know which preon number I need to select and which posthalf number I need to select, but you need to get this into your system. If you don't know it, you can look it up easily at the website, and it will save you loads and loads of time. So for the posthalf, if you want to use GraFx, you can put in the number 4. So let's do that. Number 4, save it, and then I can reset this CFX. Again, if I use CrystalFX, it will change on the fly, but since I've done this using a notepad and edit the configuration files manually, it needs to reset to be able to spot the changes. I think you can also change sound fonts, but resetting at this point is quicker for me. Now, let's have a look if all changes are in place. So if the pre-on, the power on, the regular blade style with the blasters, a lockup, clashes, everything is in place, and now the power off and post off. Let's see. And that's all in working order. Okay, that's very nice. Let's see if we can show this a little bit bigger, like this. There you have the post-off glow that we created. So everything is actually in place right now. In Resume, what we did on the SD card, so I need to enable SD access mode again. So on the SD card, what we now have is a GraFx folder which has the GraFx configuration file completely set up correctly. We've got a power off, power on, pre-on and post-off effect, and they're all working together and they're creating a rather nice blade style. So this is just about all the steps that you need to create your own fully custom blade style. I must admit I'm using red for a reason, because red is a very easy color to blend. Another trick is to use the purest of colors. So if you're using red and you're starting out, use full red. If you're using blue, use full blue, because those colors are easily transferable between any bitmap editor. If I select a full red in Photoshop or Paint, it will of course easily match full red on the CFX. So that's a little trick that you can take into account. Besides that, it's just one hell of a lot of experimenting. Once you get the configuration out of your system, it's always the same steps. It's always the same bits and pieces that you need to put in place. It's always setting up the GraFx folder. It's always knowing which sound fonts are using which color profiles and which blade profiles, and set the sound font to use the exact blade and color profile that you wanted to use. Then change the blade profile step by step, adding the power on, adding the pre-on, adding the power off, and adding the GraFx settings that you need for that specific animation and effect. And that's about it. Now, I can imagine this can be quite a lot to take in. Please don't hesitate to ask me any questions. If you have any problems with creating these GraFx animations and you want some help, please do watch this video. And after that, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be glad to help. Now, I hope this helps, and if you want me to do another video on a specific part of this GraFx blade style creation, please let me know and I'll take the time to create one. So, have a good one. Bye bye.